Welcome to Banished by Blaze. I'm Jenny Blaze, and we're here to cover my absolute most favorite show in the world, The Traitors. For our first season, we'll be covering The Traitors US Season 3, which is currently airing on Peacock and is the #1 unscripted series in the US. Since we're already 4 episodes in, we will start by going through each cast member one by one. First, to take a look at their backgrounds and see who they are. Second, to critique their gameplay to date. If you do not want spoilers, this is not the place for you, and you shall be banished immediately. Be gone. At the end of each episode, we, and by we, I mean me, will be identifying who we would banish or murder based on what we know and what we've seen on each episode. Before we get into it, we have some disclaimers. This podcast is for entertainment only. Everything said is alleged. There's no fact checking. This is not journalism. And since these are real people we are discussing, I think it's important to be extremely clear that we do not condone bullying of any kind. While we may have some opinions and speak our minds in this contained space, we will never wish harm to anyone in real life. Even Tom Sandoval. Why don't we get into it? Speaking of Tom Sandoval, let's start with him. Like I said, we're going to give a background on each player and then give our thoughts on their gameplay to date in the first 4 episodes. First up, Tom Sandoval. How do we know him? Vanderpump Rules, Scandoval. He was also on Special Forces. Never made it to the end. Just a side note. And he was also on The Masked Singer. He never made it to the end of that either. But we know him as the failed restaurateur of Schwartz and Sandy's, a sweaty, stinky mess of a human being who cheated on his longtime girlfriend, Ariana Madix, with their good friend, Raquel Leviss, while filming Vanderpump Rules. And while it was airing, this affair went on for 7 months. Complete diabolical mess. We covered it all. How is Tom playing this game? Well, currently, he's a quote-unquote faithful. And it seems to be extraordinarily difficult for him to play this role. I say that because the way he's acting is like a complete spaz. He is throwing out names recklessly. He is mad dogging people around the round table, freaking them out. Bob the drag queen was a victim of his. He's got major pit stains at breakfast in one episode. Like, what is that all about? He's super selfish, never sacrificed himself, and he's always trying to get himself a shield before helping out the team. This is very on brand for Tom Sandoval if you don't know who he is. The only time he seems like he knows what he's doing is when he has to think like a traitor. For example, in episode 4, Wes says, "What's one way to know 100% sure that someone is a traitor?" And it was the first time Tom Sandoval said anything on point, and it was answering Wes's questions. Immediately, he said, "If you're a traitor," because he knows how to be a traitor. Real good. He is really good at being a traitor. But let's move on to Chrishelle Stause. She is also a faithful. How do we know her? We know her best from Selling Sunset on Netflix. She's also friends with Ariana Madix and hates Tom Sandoval. So loving that for us. How is she playing this game? I think Chrishelle is very smart and is playing the game wisely. I can see her going far, especially after seeing how she handled herself against Tom Sandoval when he went after her during the roundtable. I loved it. Here for it. She also has pointed out times when the guys were being sexist on challenges. So I hope she keeps it up and I'll be rooting for her. Next up, we have Nikki Garcia, who is also a faithful. How do we know her? You may know her from WWE, World Wrestling Entertainment. She is the other half of the Bella twins. They entered the reality TV world on Total Divas, but then had their own spinoff called Total Bellas. Nikki used to date John Cena and was even engaged to him until she broke it off and wound up marrying her Dancing with the Stars partner, Artem, who she had a baby with. Since the filming of The Traitors, Nikki reported a domestic violence incident against Artem, and they are now divorced. But let's talk about her gameplay. I think Nikki is also very smart. I think she's playing the game wisely, similar to Chrishelle. One thing about Nikki is that she was put in a coffin on a short list by the Traitors, but was not murdered. So because of that, it put some heat on her, which she deflected very well at the round table when Wes came after her. So for that alone, I think that Nikki can hold her own. And I think she can and will go far. Her only downfall would be her being seen as a threat and being murdered by the Traitors. That's the only thing I could see where there may be some holes in her game. Meaning, I don't think Nikki would get banished unless the gamers ganged up on her, like Wes. And simply because they see her as a threat. They always come for the women. Next up, we have Ciara Miller, who is also a faithful. How do we know her? She is on Summer House, and I don't think there's any such thing as supermodels anymore, but if there were, she'd be one because this girl is perfection. Love her. Inside and out. She's just gorgeous. How is she playing this game? Not bad so far. She was even a leader on the first mission. I don't know why she was put on the short list to be put in the coffin like Nikki, but it feels like the Traitors are just picking on women and non-gamers again. However, I was so proud of Ciara. She held her own at the round tables. I think she can go far if they don't kill her first. Moving on to Dorinda Medley, who is also a faithful. How do we know her? What are you doing here without Dorinda? I'll tell you how I'm doing. Not well, bitch. I made it nice. If you don't know, Dorinda is a legendary housewife from The Real Housewives of New York. She also hosted season 2 of The Real Housewives Ultimate Girls Trip at Bluestone Manor, her beautiful home in the Berkshires, aka the Berserkshires, which I had the honor of being invited to for this past Halloween. While I was there, I asked her what she could tell us about the Traitors, and she was very tight-lipped, which I totally understood because apparently if you break the Traitors contract, you are fined a large amount of money that is more than the prize money. I'll just say that. No, thank you. How is Dorinda playing? How is she playing the Traitors? Not well, bitch. Spoiler alert, Dorinda was the first person to be murdered. This is where I think she made a couple mistakes. First mistake, she volunteered to be sacrificed on the first mission, making herself look like a traitor. All the housewives who volunteered to sacrifice themselves, I don't think they realized what they were doing when they decided to sacrifice themselves, because I think they were trying to like take one for the team and do a good deed, but it backfired on them because now they look like traitors. Second mistake, she spoke her mind when she was pissed off after that mission where she sacrificed herself, directed her anger towards specific individuals, giving the traitors the opportunity to use Dorinda as a pawn in a setup or some kind of framing. That was rough to watch. Next up, we have Chanel Ayan, who also is a faithful. How do we know her? The Real Housewives of Dubai. I loved that show. Unfortunately, Bravo has put that franchise on pause. I've interacted with Ayan several times and I just love her. However, when I heard she was going to be on the Traitors, I did fear for her a little bit. How is she playing? Another spoiler alert. Ayan was the second person murdered. They claim they did it to bring confusion, so they were using her as a pawn. But this murder really pissed me off because I think targeting housewives is such a basic Move. The housewives are not threats to anyone. I've said this many times in the past, but I will continue to say it until people start changing their gameplay on this show because they're always approaching things all wrong. The most deceitful backstabbers should be taken out first. Why? Because the goal is to get to the end of the game by yourself and or with people you trust. You don't want to be at the end of this game with people you don't trust because then nobody will win. The gamers just piss me off. They act so high and mighty, like they know what they're doing, and they underestimate everyone else, treating them like second-class citizens. It makes me so mad. I want to become a gamer so I can annihilate gamers in a game. Maybe I am a gamer. Next up, Dolores Catania. How do we know her? The Real Housewives of New Jersey, baby. Our girl is from Patterson, the daughter of a cop, but grew up with some not so straight edge people. Dolores is someone I could see going far in this game, unless a gamer targets her because she's a housewife. And like I said, they're underestimating non-gamers. And they're also just like targeting women. It's gross. But how is Dolores doing? Dolores is playing a good game. She got a shield in the latest mission, which felt really good to see because we see these gamers and men trying to take over in each mission, and it pisses me off. Again, I think she could go far. I can't wait to see like activated Dolores. She's keeping her cool right now. She's doing really well. Let's move on to Robyn Dixon, who is also a faithful. How do we know her? We wish we didn't. It's hard to claim Robyn Dixon as a Bravo leb, even though she was on The Real Housewives of Potomac for quite a number of seasons. Robyn is not one of my favorites for a couple of reasons, but mainly because she's married to Juan Dixon, who I believe is a vile human being. In addition, I think Robyn is complicit in some of the negligence that took place with Juan Dixon and his basketball team. I'm not even going to get into that whole story, but it's wild. Google it. How is Robyn doing? Well, surprisingly, Robyn is engaged and playing a pretty bold game. She sacrificed herself while yelling at everyone on 2 separate missions. She's been accused of being a traitor at the round table and has talked her way out of being banished. So kudos to her for that. She's awful at figuring out who is a traitor, but she's holding her own at the round tables, which I think is the hardest part when you're faithful. Because of this, she's probably low on the hit list by the Traitors, so she may make it far. Who knows? Next up, we got Bob Harper, another faithful. How do we know him? I know Bob from Biggest Loser way back in the day when he was in his prime. I don't know if I like that show or not because they would go to extremes, but they were also saving a lot of these people's lives. So it's hard for me to really say whether that show is good or not. But what I remember about Bob is I remember him yelling at people because he was one of the trainers. He'd be yelling at them when they're working out and they're like, I can't do anymore. And he's like, you can do it. And he's like pushing them. But he was also very sweet when it came to the therapy side of losing weight and being a trainer. So I still love Bob. After Biggest Loser, Bob actually had a heart attack and was dead, I think, for a short period of time before being revived back to life, which was obviously life-changing for him considering he was a picture of perfect health to everyone. How is he playing this game? Bob is very on brand on the Traitors. He gets emotional when faced with major challenges like he did during the latest mission where they had to carry heavy statues up a hill. I love Bob, so I'm rooting for him, but I couldn't help but think how much of a full circle moment it was to see Bob struggling in a physical activity, knowing that if he was still a trainer on The Biggest Loser, he'd be yelling at himself to hustle harder. Like I said, love Bob, but thought that was very interesting. Next up, we have Dylan Efron, who is a faithful. How do we know him? He's Zac Efron's younger brother. He was on a docuseries called Down to Earth. I think Zac Efron was in that. How is Dylan playing this game? Dylan has already declared that he wants to play this game the way it should be played. I want to know why he said it should be played like this, but whatever. He said, I intend to play this game the way it should be, as a faithful. It's giving Pilot Pete from season 2. He's playing the game pretty well, except for him trusting Boston Rob, who is a traitor. And I'm just watching all this and thinking, now, why on earth would Dylan trust Boston Rob? And the only reason is because he's a fan of Boston Rob, like big fan. He's sucking Rob's asshole. That's how much of a fan he is. And I truly think that will be his downfall. I also think righteous, faithfuls have a very hard time winning. They also are usually big targets, and I wouldn't be surprised if Boston Rob is the one to kill him or get him banished in the end. We'll see. Zac Efron's brother. Sam Asghari. Is that how you say his last name? He is a faithful. How do we know him? He was married to Britney Spears, and that's all I know about him. And I'm not one of those people who follows Britney like day in and day out. So I don't really know. Is he a villain? I think the general consensus is that he's a villain, but I don't really know why. How he's playing, I would say he's very forgetful. Like, I barely remember he's on this show. He did sacrifice himself on the first mission. And even though he is a faithful, I'm surprised no one really suspected him of potentially being a traitor. It's like with the rest of the people who sacrificed themselves, they acted like they could be doing it because they're traitors. But when Sam volunteered, they acted like it was the most notable thing anyone could ever do, which was weird to me. But I think he could make it far, mostly because he's a non-factor. But I don't think he'll be at the very, very end. Moving on, Gabby Windey. She is a faithful. How do we know her? I don't know her. Apparently, she was on The Bachelor and The Bachelorette, but now she's a lesbian. How she's playing, I like the way she's playing. She's very mindful of her moves, like when she overheard Danielle in the wine cellar when the murder in plain sight took place. She was wise to keep it in mind, but to also keep it moving. I think she has good intuition, but her downfall could be that she's not really confident in her own intuition. So hopefully we see a shift in that, because I think she could go far unless she's murdered for being a woman. Next up is Wells Adams. He is a faithful. I don't know him. Apparently he was on The Bachelorette and Bachelor in Paradise. Something I also didn't know, he's also married to Sarah Hyland from Modern Family. New news for me. How he's playing, spoiler alert, he was the first faithful to be banished, and I didn't like him anyways because he was pointing fingers at our girls. Good riddance, goodbye. I don't think he knew what he was doing anyways. Britney Haynes, sorry. She is also a faithful, and how do we know her? I don't, but she was on Big Brother. Apparently her and Danielle have had some beef in the past. In regards to her playing, I haven't really noticed her. So I feel like she will go far because she's technically a quote unquote gamer and she's keeping a low profile. Also, the gamers tend to stick together. So I don't see the traitors targeting her unless it's Danielle specifically. But I feel like that would be too obvious. So I doubt they will murder her anytime soon. Next up, we have Jeremy Collins, who is a faithful. I didn't know who he was. Apparently he was on Survivor and some other competition shows, so we could categorize him as a gamer, I guess. How he's playing, spoiler alert, Jeremy was murdered when the traitors had to make a short list of 3 people to go in the coffins. It was Ciara, Nikki, Bella, and Jeremy. They wound up murdering Jeremy. Rightfully so. In my opinion, I think he should have gone, because I would be targeting all the most ruthless gamers first. They can't be trusted. Just like Jeremy could not be trusted and should not be in the game. He was murdered because he was onto Danielle. And this is why you do not throw out names in the beginning. But like I said, I'm glad he's gone because he told the traitors he would work with them. As he was laying in the coffin, that was his way to get out of the coffin. He said, "Don't kill me, I'll work with you." But they killed him anyways. Next up, we have Lord Ivar Mountbatten. He is a faithful. How do we know him? I don't. Apparently, he's a British royal who was married to a woman at one time, but then married a man. I guess he's like the first openly gay royal. We love that. However, I don't like the way he's playing. He's got an attitude way too early for my liking, which is making me feel like he's entitled. And that kind of, I hate to say this, but that kind of goes along with the stereotype of being a royal, right? Like the way he kept urging women to sacrifice themselves on the boat mission was enough for me to say he should be murdered. He also seems bitchy, and I don't like him. Sorry. Next up is Tony, another faithful. I didn't know who he was, but apparently he was on Survivor. According to Caroline, Tony seems like he was a ruthless and cutthroat gamer. Ding, 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 ding. That is my sign to say murder. But it doesn't matter because, spoiler, Tony was banished and somehow blamed Boston Rob, calling him a sellout as he cried in the circle of truth. What a fucking sore loser crybaby. How is Rob a sellout to Tony? Tony was out from votes before they even read what Rob's vote was going to be. These gamers are too much for me. Like, get a grip. It's a game. And I felt like he was trying to manipulate everyone before the game even started, before they even chose the traitor. So yeah, I would definitely want him out, and I'm glad he's gone. Sorry, Tony. You can't play like that in this game. This is a different beast. Next up, we have Danielle Reyes. She is a traitor. I didn't know who she was. Apparently, she's from Big Brother. They claim she is the best player to never win. However, I think they said the same thing about Ciara from season 1, who won the Traitors. So I don't know how Danielle is playing. I would say do less and say less, Danielle, because people are on to her because of her overacting. She just needs to tone it down a bit. But as a traitor, I think she's playing a decent game so far. She's out for Boston Rob, and I'm here for that. So I hope it goes her way. Next, we have Caroline Weiger. She is also a traitor. I don't know who she is. She's from Survivor, I guess, but she is my favorite traitor. I get her. I love her strategy. She's playing crazy and dumb. That's how I would play. And she has good ideas on who to murder, but no one listens to her. I feel seen. I feel like I am Caroline. Oh, boy. She could go very far. I think she'll go to the end. Bob the drag queen was a traitor. I didn't know Bob before the show, but apparently he won season 8 of RuPaul's Drag Race. Spoiler, Bob is the first traitor to be banished. I love him and how he acts, but he was doing way too much. It wasn't the dramatics of crying or talking too much for me. It was when he would do subtle things like say, everyone's looking at the last 3 guys who were added. That is literally what got him out of this game. Because if he didn't say that, Boston Rob wouldn't have attacked him and he'd still be in the game. However, I think it was only a matter of time because Dylan was on to Bob, and Bob is kind of obvious. The only reason people were scared to vote for him was because everyone liked him, and because after Dylan first called him out at the round table, Bob the drag queen dragged Zac Efron's baby brother, and it was tough to watch. Next up, Boston Rob Mariano, the traitor. I know his name, and I know that he was on Survivor at one point, but I don't remember why he's so well known and is this huge infamous player. I know he's known as being ruthless and cutthroat. So for me, That is a signal right away that this guy needs to be gone. As in regards to how he's playing, the first twist of the game was when all the players came up to the castle. They had a bunch of people in cloaks and masks. All of them left except for one. Turns out it was Boston Rob. Alan said, if anyone wants Boston Rob to join the game, all you have to do is shake my hand, but then you have to pick someone to be eliminated immediately. If I was playing, I wouldn't have picked anyone. I would have just sat there quietly, which is what they all did, which meant that Rob was not going to enter the game. I did think that was kind of weird, though, because why would you bring someone in like that? So obviously, like in my mind, I'm like, he's got to be coming back at some point. So that is exactly what happens. At the end of the first episode, Alan says, you're going to join the game, but as a traitor. And you're going to join with 2 other people. Rob is cocky. He's a gamer. He underestimates people, and I don't like him. He needs to go. I hope Danielle gets him out. Also, I think he basically identified himself as a traitor by going after Bob, the drag queen, and Wes even picked up on that. So, speaking of Wes, let's talk about this guy. I know Wes from the challenge from years, decades ago, like when he was young. I didn't watch all the seasons of the challenge. But Wes was also just on House of Villains season 2 and had a very embarrassing and pitiful game. How he's playing on this show, he's playing like I would expect Wes to play any game. He's very on brand, gamer mentality. I surprisingly feel like he's actually kind of harmless at the current moment, but I'm sure that will change. Again, he's a gamer who will underestimate non-gamers and is not to be trusted in any way, shape, or form. He needs to go. Sorry, dude. And then we have Derek Levasseur. He is a faithful. I actually recognized his face from watching the ID channel, Investigation Discovery. I seen him host some true crime shows, but I didn't know he was on Big Brother. However, I did know he was or is a cop. So as far as his gameplay, he's playing like a true gamer, which pisses me off. The way he came after Ciara and said in interrogations, because he's a cop, people who curse are usually untrustworthy or some shit. And like that whole thing pissed me off. Because 1, don't go after Ciara. 2, you better fucking believe I'm going to be swearing my ass off if I'm being interrogated for something I did not do. So that interrogation tip of his is a bunch of bullshit. And for that alone, I want this man gone. I thought maybe because he is a cop, he might have a soul, but the way he's talking in his confessionals, he sounds like a villainous gamer. Although he did help out others in the statue mission. So I will give that to him. He's kind of a wild card, actually. So we'll see. That is the whole cast. So now I have to decide who should be banished by Blaze. At this moment in time, I am going to say that Boston Rob needs to go. He's a straight white male gamer in the turret, which makes him the most dangerous person in this whole game at the moment. He needs to go. I would not want to be at the end with him in this game. Also, stay the fuck away from the housewives and Ciara. I think that's all I got. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. That's all we have for our first episode of Banished by Blaze. Please consider subscribing, sharing, and leaving a 5-star review. Until next time, faithfuls, stay lit.